the season's second college football playoff rankings will shake up the top 5. Oregon and Ohio State are poised to lead the way as they inch closer to a possible rematch in the Big Ten championship game. This marks the first time since 2021 that two teams from the same conference, Georgia and Alabama, will headline the second rankings release. However, Georgia and Miami will likely drop out of the top 5 after suffering significant losses. Georgia's dominant road loss to Mississippi and Miami's upset by Georgia Tech has complicated the playoff race for both teams. The Bulldogs' second loss pushes them into a logjam of teams competing for the SEC championship game spot, while Miami's first loss forces them into a tight battle with SMU for the ACC crown. As a result, Penn State and Tennessee are set to climb into the top 5. Penn State's win over Washington makes them a more appealing pick for the committee, and they will likely leapfrog Tennessee, even though the Volunteers secured a solid victory over Mississippi State. As Georgia and Miami fall out, expect these two teams to move up, joining Oregon, Ohio State, and Texas at the top of the rankings. But the big question remains, how far will Georgia drop? The Bulldogs' reputation will take a hit after a second SEC loss, but their wins over Texas and Clemson could keep them ahead of Mississippi. Still, Georgia is unlikely to remain above Alabama, which recently dominated LSU 41-13. Expect Alabama to rise from the previous rankings to number 9, and for Georgia to land somewhere between number 10 and number 11. As for the ACC, despite their recent loss to Georgia Tech, Miami is likely to remain atop the conference, though the committee could face some tough decisions. Miami and SMU have won over Louisville and Duke, but SMU's stronger overall resume, including victories over TCU and Pittsburgh, puts them in contention. However, the 9-spot gap between the two teams in the rankings is likely too large for SMU to overcome, meaning Miami will stay ahead, although they could drop as low as number 12. In the case of Indiana and Brigham Young, Indiana will likely stay ahead of BYU. Despite struggling offensively in a close win against Michigan, the Hoosiers have been consistent, and their position at number 6 seems secure. BYU, meanwhile, barely escaped a rivalry game against Utah with a controversial penalty, and though they're still in contention, they're expected to follow closely behind Indiana at number 7. Regarding the Big Ten and SEC's presence in the rankings, expect both conferences to maintain a strong foothold. The SEC could drop LSU from the rankings after back-to-back losses to Texas A&M and Alabama, but LSU will likely remain in the top 25, especially given their previous strong showing this season. After a third straight win against Vanderbilt, South Carolina is a likely candidate to move up and join the rankings, sitting just behind Missouri, which also earned a solid victory over Oklahoma. Meanwhile, the Big Ten will not add a 5th-ranked team, as Iowa and Minnesota suffered terrible losses. Still, the conference will feature all 4 top teams: Oregon at number 1, Ohio State at number 2, Penn State at number 4, and Indiana at number 6. With teams like Texas, Penn State, and Tennessee moving up, the top 5 will look vastly different after the second rankings release. As the season progresses, these rankings will shift, but the race for playoff spots is becoming more competitive than ever. With a few weeks remaining, every game is critical, and the final rankings will reveal which teams have what it takes to secure a spot in the playoff race.